how well the town looked from that time with the flags and the lights and whatnot, but very, very good ceremony. Very happy to see the crowd that came out on Memorial Day for it, and very happy of all the people, the town people, and the two exchange clubs that put it together to make us look so well. It was a great event. And my other question is, I guess, for our town manager. I noticed about a week ago, maybe it's been there longer, but I really didn't pay that much attention. At one of our rental properties across the street, I would gather from the passport office or the post office,
Okay.
there's a travel trailer. And,
Yes.
The last time, just out a couple hours ago, seen people coming in and out of the travel trailer. What's the story, if you know anything?
I do.
Okay.
But basically, the realtor that we use is, the realtor that we use for renting property, anytime any of the tenants have requests or concerns, they notify them. If it's general maintenance, they handle it without us giving specific approval. In this particular case, it is not a lived-in travel trailer, it is a vacation type unit. And the tenants paid for extra gravel so that it could be placed back there, so that it could be stored properly. And that was somewhere in the neighborhood of a year ago, but they do use it on somewhat of a regular basis. Our tenants that's there, he shares the unit with family and friends as far as them taking it elsewhere. So it is not always there, as you appropriately said, but no one is living in there. So I can only assume, because I don't know specifically if there was people in and out, is to get ready for another trip and or maintenance and repair of the unit.
Right. Thank you, because my concern was, and you put that to rest, was that it's being rented out to someone who's living there. If it's just used for vacation, that's legal, and that's okay for me.
We did discuss that there is no occupancy even for one night at that location.
Thank you. And that's it, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jarozinski? Ms. Harris?
I had several, but I'm just going to mention just a couple. Just put this big piece of candy in my mouth. I know I was going to talk. Only thing I just have is I'm excited about seeing the party in the park coming up this Friday. I was attending a funeral Friday, and someone at the funeral walked up to me asking me about party in the park. So I was pretty excited to hear our citizens excited about our events that we're offering in our town. Several of them are going on in Statesville and other places. So but I'm just glad to see that they're excited about ours. Also excited about the fireworks coming back on the 3rd, and also the parade coming up. I have seen the 5Ks, but if I don't have my inhaler, I'm not participating in the 5K. But
The mayor ran, just saying, the mayor
the
ran.
mayor did.
And Mr. Jarozinski also ran.
I love seeing the setup. Everybody seems so excited about those 5Ks, but maybe one day I'll participate in some way, form, or
You can
fashion.
join me on
If
the
not,
next
just
one.
stand on the sideline.
You can join me on the next one. That golf cart
Okay.
does wonders.
But that's all. Just those things that I just wanted to mention.
I see the chief's not here. He was supposed to pick me up at the halfway mark. He got messed up where I had to get back. I'll leave that for another discussion.
That's all.
Okay, great. Mr. Hinkle?
I'm glad to hear we've got two fit folks on the council here. Glad to join you, but I'm at that point where I can walk fast, but I can't run. The only thing I can say is Walk of Heroes events, both opening, cutting the ribbon, if you will, or start of it, and the finish on Memorial Day Monday. It was an outstanding event and closure of a very important week, and honored of Memorial Day, done by our speakers, both honored, of course, were not only the folks, the veterans that are still with us, but also those that are no longer with us since Memorial Day. So I'm glad glad we were able to honor both at the same time, and that our folks who are serving and have served, and those who are no longer with us, that they are known, recognized, and appreciated, and thanked very much for their service for this country and our freedoms. And that is it, sir.
Great, thank you. Couple things. As I mentioned, I was out of town. Seems to be some work on 21
Yes, sir.
at the charter school. Idea of what's going on down there?
That was the Smith Village project that was approved somewhere in the neighborhood of 4.5 years ago. These are road improvements that was required of them once they built so many units in the neighborhood. And this is an extension and widening of the road through 21. It is not the last widening, it is just what is required at this point in time for that specific development. Like I say, somewhere in the neighborhood of 4.5 years ago is when that was originally approved.
Can I ask a question related to that, Mayor? So I'm assuming that's what's going on Winecoff as well, that project that was, I think it's Mary something.
Yes, ma'am.
That widening too, I think that was part of that approved project.
That one was somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5 to 3 years ago. But yes, they, on Winecoff, they're disturbing the curbing and the guttering. And then they will also, there'll be a rough grade initially. So when they're done within the next 2 weeks, that is not the final dress, as they call it in the industry, of the road, but it will at least be the new width. And because of the construction, vehicles entering and leaving the site, Austin and I, Andrew as well, have had numerous calls of water running here, there, mud going across the road. This should alleviate most of those concerns and make sure that our plan has been followed. But yes, ma'am, you're exactly right. It is because that project was approved, and that's what they're doing now.
Good, I wanted that one on record too. Thank you, Mayor.
Update on Mad Monkey.
The gorilla is gone. There's a lot of social media buzz, but not one inquiry into our office unless the town attorney has received something that he would advise us of. There's several out there that talk about lawsuits, but we're ready and prepared if they want to go that route.
There's one aspect, but and I'm not sure what the closed session is about, but I would talk to you about it in that closed session.
Great.
Related to that.
Great. Any update on Rough and Loop?
We should have the letter. Part of our requirement is to make sure if there's any asbestos involved in the unit. We have reached out. That letter should be coming. To my knowledge, it has not been received yet. But we do know, yes, there is asbestos present. Once we have that letter, then the Planning and Zoning Department can post for bids to take it down.
Great. Follow up on the last meeting we had around the public requesting to a conversation, I think, at the end of the meeting that came up at the end. Maybe an opportunity for us to respond back to, I can't think of the lady's name, Ms. Parks, I think.
Yes, Sharon Parks. I have had a couple conversations with her, and basically she asked if it was moot because the council had voted, and I explained yes. We were proceeding forward due to the time frames. They basically asked where they missed keeping or earning our business for the future, and I explained candidly, as I had received comments from several on council and the citizens, them coming in and immediately punching us in the mouth with higher rates instead of being willing to negotiate a time and an appropriate budget year. One of the budget amendments you all will be voting on tonight, the most astronomical part of that is because of those increases that they shot us in the arm with with little to no notice. And she understood that and even admitted she had recommended that they wait before they did that. But I didn't know what else to tell her other than that. We have received notice from them as to when they will begin picking up the cans. Most of you all have agreed to go watch the new cans being made. And next week should start the transition of old cans being picked up and new cans being delivered. Just spoke with staff this afternoon. Those plans are not finalized, but they're close enough that we will be reporting something on town webpage tomorrow, our Facebook pages, to try to make as many citizens aware. We will also do a reverse robocall type thing. It used to be called reverse 911, I'm sorry. But we will do a robocall trying to explain to citizens what the timelines of picking up old cans by Republic Benfield and the time frame that the new cans will be out there. Unfortunately, there may be a couple days lapse to where somebody will not have a specific can, whether it be recycles or whether it be the trash. Our new provider is aware, and we have a little couple week window to maybe pick up a recycle can, for example, that has trash in it that normally would not be. But we expect there to be some hiccups, but we're trying to make them as few as possible in the transition.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Question, just out of curiosity, the levy you mentioned a while ago, concerning the asbestos house on Welcome Loop that's being raised, is that coming from someone, a company that goes in and checks this and then, advises us if they found asbestos or not? Where is this information?
Yes, sir. The people that do the testing have to be certified in that ability so that we are able to prove to the property owners we did our due diligence and used a reputable company with the proper credentials that identified it one way or the other. That being the case, it basically makes the fee for tearing the structure down double, if not triple, because it has to be handled a different way. And again, that as Gary had mentioned to you all in one of the previous meetings, there's certain steps we have to go by legally before we just go and knock it down, and this is one of those.
The next item on the agenda is consideration of accepting the resignation of the town attorney, Thomas. Is that a request or answer? No.
He provided it. I don't know that we can make him work if he don't want to, but he did provide his notice. It's just at that meeting, it was not officially accepted.
Well, and, I mean, I don't think you have to accept, because it's a unilateral thing, but what I said was, I would resign when y'all get you a new attorney.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I didn't notice anything in the agendas about appointing one, so
Okay.
it seemed like the best thing to do is wait until you do have somebody, then I resign.
Okay. So from a timing perspective, you're willing to hang on until we get a new attorney in place?
Yeah, that's what I indicated in May, and I'm still willing to do that. I mean, you may have to collect me from France or somewhere like that, but no.
So there's no year associated with that. All right, thank you. Any other comments? All right. Do we need a motion on that?
Well, as I said, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. A man's offering to resign. I don't know that we can force him to work. However, it does change the scope of you all's agreement, even though it's been asked for previous on written contracts and there's none there. I think for the formality and transparency's sakes, just the fact that you are acknowledging his intent to resign, even though you don't give it a specific date of acceptance, would be appropriate for us to go forward and begin the process. At this point, we have 2 interested law firms. One we've received written notice of, the other is asking if there's a process, which we will discuss in closed session, how you all would like to proceed. We have a couple legal matters in closed session, but this would be one of those.
All right. So,
A motion, yes.
all right. Is there a motion to accept the attorney's resignation at the time that we fulfill the role?
I make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Almost did get a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, that motion passed. All right.
Mayor, I'm sorry, did you say at the time someone else fills the role?
Yeah, at the time that, yeah, it's filled. Next item on the agenda is staff reports. Turn over to Mr. Watt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is the season that we have some vacations coming, so some of our normal department directors that would be here are not, and that's okay. Other than that, I would just like to thank all of you for your kind comments, our citizens who participated, as you all already said, about our Walk of Heroes, honoring Armed Services Day, leaving the flags up through Memorial Day. I'd like to thank both exchange clubs, as you all have acknowledged publicly, but also the Fraternal Order Police that paid for the cost of the food. It was another great ceremony this year, and we had several hundred, maybe even close to 300 people present. I think that also speaks for our citizens as a whole, that once this started, we knew it would be kind of small to begin with. This year, they did sell all the flags to someone. We hope to extend that number incrementally year by year. It's up to the Exchange Club as to what numbers they want to increase to, but they have already acknowledged that we will have more flags next year. And as some citizens and even some of you all have suggested, we hope sometime in the near future that they will extend the entire greenway, not just the area that's predominantly in front of Town Hall, just a little bit north and south. But I do appreciate all of the volunteer hours that did that. That is part of the Exchange Club's platform, is Americanism. And what better way can we show that by having the American flags displayed, while also recognizing all of those that keep our community and country, the society that we have, with the freedoms that we have. Also for Party in the Park, being that was mentioned, we are looking for a larger than normal crowd. As Council Lady Harris said, the community buzz seems to be out there, and at least this point, the weather projections are telling us we should have a fine evening for it, and we're looking forward to that being a success. The parade coming up on the last Saturday of the month, we have a lot of participants in there. Just a reminder to all of those that's watching us on YouTube or will watch later, the parade will start at the fairgrounds this year. That's not a choice that we just made to change, but it's because of construction occurring at the CATS facility, and there's not sufficient room for us to continue beginning there. It will come south from the fairgrounds on Main Street, as our Independence Parade has always been on Main Street, with the exception of 1 year. I looked at Justin, he don't know, he's not been here that long. But all jokes aside, all but 1 year, if I recall correctly, it has been on Main Street, and it will go back there. There will be several vendors throughout, just like in times past, if people are needing concessions and/or other paraphernalia. There still is time if people wants to enter and participate in the parade. They can contact Amber Ward at the Parks and Rec Department so she can get them logged in. I appreciate our police chief. One of the complaints we always get with any parade is the stoppage or the breaks, if you will, in between participants in the parade. The rules are being reiterated to all of those that want to be in there. We are putting the walking groups, without naming anybody, in specific sequence. That way we hope to not have the breaks that have sometimes naturally occurred, but we are looking for a huge success there. And that's all I have comment-wise. Be glad to answer any specific questions if you all have.
In terms of the parade, folks who are gathering at the fairgrounds,
Yes, sir.
we feel confident that folks who will be entering the parade will only be allowed at certain entrances to the fairground, but no more entrances after that.
That is correct. We have law enforcement throughout the entire route. Intersections will be appropriately marked. The DOT trailers, we did get DOT approval to shut down the highway, which is a requirement. And there will be appropriate signage advising detours for those who are not spectating or participating. But for our participants, they have to leave the fairgrounds. We will have the appropriate volunteers and/or staff logging them off as they come out. And again, the whole route will have law enforcement ensuring that people are where they're supposed to be. I failed to mention, Mr. Mayor, July 3rd is our fireworks night. We have had some citizens reach out social media-wise. None have contacted us directly, basically complaining that we're celebrating a holiday that's not the holiday. There's twofold for that. One, we have to make sure the vendors are available to provide the fireworks when and if they can. We have always done it the Saturday before, so it being the night before, but by decision and purpose, that's when the vendor could be available, was the 3rd as an option. There were a couple other dates prior to, but we felt like that may interrupt people's work schedules. If we were firing fireworks at 9:30, 10 o'clock on a Monday night, people would have to go to work on Tuesday. We felt that that may be more disruptive in the community than doing it the night before when the majority are off the work the next day. So it was a multifaceted purpose of why the 3rd was chosen. It was not that we don't realize what day July 4th is.
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
As you said, we have set off fireworks before, not on the 4th of July, 2 days before. No complaints, but we got a complaint because it's July 3rd. I don't understand the rationale.
The only thing I can say there, sir, being as respectful as I can, we can pass out $100 bills and people's gonna complain how we did it. So there's always gonna be some that don't find the joy or the positives in whatever we're trying to do. So instead of engaging with them or arguing with them, I just wanted to explain to you all in an open meeting, we did give thought, and there was a purpose of why July 3rd. Not that staff did not want to work on a holiday that most people's off, because we normally do. It's just that's when the vendor was available, and we thought that it would impede. Even on July 4th night, there's a lot of people still having to work on Friday. But we discussed it at length, but I do appreciate your comments.
Duly noted.
Next item is discussion of placing the town logo on town street signage.
Austin, if you will, stand up and be the model.
Hard to do that.
As the email I sent out to you all, giving you a little bit of notice that this would be discussed at this meeting, those two signs that Austin is holding were actually placed at the intersection of Southeast Way and New Street. That way you all could see them. If you had an opportunity, try to see. I understand if you're driving 25 mile an hour, which is what the speed limit is on that street, that people's not going to be able to necessarily read the town of Troutman in the left-hand side of the sign. But in discussing with Austin, and again, his, which will be our employee of the month, by the way, Jason Edwards, saw this done somewhere else and thought that it would be a good idea for the town. And Austin, in my discussion, instead of putting them on every street or road in the town, we thought that it would be most appropriate to put them on streets that we as a town own and are responsible for maintaining. The other street signs will remain, if you hold that one up, just as plain as they are, because those are maintained or ran by the state. As you can see, the lettering is all still the same. We don't shrink the size just because it's one versus the other, but we thought that it would help our citizens who maybe have not lived here a long time understand the difference between a town-maintained street or roadway versus the state one. And this would be a quick way to identifying the two, but it also continues, as you all told me, for those that were on council when I was hired, the town paid a lot of money for the branding and the logo, and I was told we'd like to see it in more places. But this serves a couple purposes. We do have some signs that need to be replaced. Some are stolen, but fortunately for us, most streets are the names that people are not stealing. Most of them are just aged out. But with you all's permission, and I did have somebody say, why did we need town council permission instead of just doing it? As has been the case with us, if we're changing policy or procedure, we feel like it certainly needs to be an opportunity for you all to discuss and give us your feelings on a direction to go instead of us doing it and not being in favor and finding out later. But we're excited about it, but we certainly defer to you all for final decision and any questions you may have.
What's your time?
That's up to y'all. I was thinking we'd do it as needed, change them as they would need, but.
No, so no problem with the vendor in terms of as needed. I mean, sometimes they want bulk, and so just.
The only thing I can say to your question, Mr. Mayor, at this point, those are not the reflective material for the letters, even the new ones.
Okay.
It's not reflective, and since Austin and I spoke, I was in another town and saw two signs. One was reflective and one was not. I definitely think before we can give you a final answer, that's something we want to explore, is to make sure that the lettering and even the logo is reflective, and that may change, certainly will change pricing, but for low light conditions and or rainy conditions, I do think it would be more advantageous for us to go with the reflective lettering. The green stays green, it's not reflective, but the lettering, that may have an effect. To answer your question, Austin and I did think ourselves just replace as needed, and that probably takes 6 months to a year. We certainly can expedite that if that is you all's desire and direction.
Your plans are to change all signs in the street signs in the town.
Sir,
Your plans are to change all street signs in the town.
if the street belongs to the town, yes. The other ones would be replaced as needed.
As needed.
Yes, sir.
So let's just say, for example, okay, well, South 21.
Yes, sir.
So South Main would remain until as needed to be replaced.
That is correct.
And then Church Street, is that not a town street?
It is.
Okay. The reason I asked that, you held Church Street up a while ago and it did not have the logo on it.
This is just an example of what we have
Oh,
currently.
I see, okay.
I didn't have an example of one of those.
I thought you were messing with me. I thought that was a town
He
meeting.
was, sir. He was.
Okay. I concur with the mayor, I would like to see, you know, even if it raises the price a little, I'd like to see, for safety and additional, to help people, and it rain, low, you know, at night, low light, so forth. I would like to see that if possible, and the only thing is, and I got out and we're on the U Street, I think it was, and stopped, and I got out, right next to the sign shop, so forth, and looked, and of course, I could see the paddle, but I had to really look hard to see the welcome to,
Yes.
you know, and of course, Troutman underneath, so forth. And then there was lettering underneath that I never could make out. It was so small. I mean, I'm sitting there standing, people are wondering, well, I'm sitting there looking at a street sign so hard, but, what's that lettering underneath?
Enjoy Lake Norman naturally.
Yep, enjoy Lake Norman naturally, which is our brand.
Okay, well, I couldn't even see it standing there, so, I don't know, you know, it's great, I like design and everything, but the smallness, welcome to, could we enlarge the paddle and something and, you know, remove the small lettering and increase the paddling and Troutman on there, so that, as you say, 25, they still kind of glimpse at it, since that welcome to is, like I said, I had to stop to see it and underneath.
I do think, to your point, we could take the welcome to off, which is the arch, and then enjoy Lake Norman naturally, that part off. That should allow them to then make the paddle and Troutman a little bit bigger. It's still not gonna be a lot bigger, but it will absolutely add more space. And yes, sir, I do think those are fine suggestions.
I mean, I just hate to put something that, even standing there, and I realize, you know, my eyesight's not like it was until I was 21, but I still, you know, anyhow, I would like to see it if that's possible.
Yes, sir.
Is there any way to enlarge that area that the logo is?
Anything's possible.
It just costs more money.
Well, it'll cost more money, but it will also make the street signs even bigger, maybe abnormally so. If you will, hold up New Street and then West Church Street sign. No, yeah. Turn New Street around, hold that other one on top. As you can see, because the word, it's made bigger, but if West Church Street, for example, if we added Troutman logo bigger to like a third, then you're gonna have basically a 3-foot street sign.
Yeah, I just looking at like the Southeast Way Drive, if it was, you know, an inch of green space removed on each end, you'd have 2 more inches of logo. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
Because West Church, you're all the way up to the ends of green.
That top
But
sign,
If you turn a little the Southeast Way, there's large gaps of South and Drive between the beginning and end of sign.
yes, sir.
Just thought. The other question, if this is gonna be a change moving forward, is this gonna be a UDO modification for, or possibly a UDO modification for the future streets that will be handed over to the towns in upcoming developments, where they will have to brand with these signs? During
Yes.
development, they can't brand with these signs because they're not our streets yet, but before they're handed over to us, that it be required they brand to these signs, so we're not footing that bill?
Yes, it would require an ordinance change for us to enforce them to do it. Also, the reflective part, the last time I checked on that, that was not also a part of our UDO. So the two would need to go together. And yes, if you also approve and gave us a direction, then Andrew can add that part to the UDO for you all to approve.
I think any future streets that we're going to receive need to be branded with the decision we're making today,
Well,
or
if we follow the plan of, once they become town streets that we maintain, then the logo's on there. The initial signs that go up may be just like it is.
Yep.
That way, when a citizen wakes up and says, there's snow out here, those people didn't come and get it. Well, it's not our street yet.
Yep.
So initially, my suggestion, do whatever you all wish. My suggestion is to allow them to continue putting up the street signs they are, and then once it's turned over to us, we then install the new sign with the logo and the reflective material. And that would not require a UDO change. That would just be us knowing when it becomes a town street, we put up things that are ours.
And to whose cost?
That would be ours.
Is there any way we could do that to where, as they build it, right, they have to have their signage, but before it gets turned over to us, that they install at their expense these signs?
I think the argument that we would get then, or pushback that we would get then, if we're going to go with the plan that once the logo's there, it's ours, they're not going to want to buy two signs. They're going to want to put one sign up. So when they put it up initially, they would want our logo on there. That way they don't have to buy another sign within a year to 3 years, depending on the size of the development. You certainly can do as you all choose, but I do think it would be a lot of pushback that staff gets and has to deal with for making a developer actually buy two signs if you all approve the idea that once our logo's there, it means it's ours to maintain and control.
How much more is that than regular signs? I mean, I know we have to replace them anyway because they're getting dated.
Yes.
Does that cost much more to add that?
I cannot tell you the actual cost with us going to a reflective material because that
Right.
came to me since we discussed.
Mhm.
But sign for sign is $9 difference to have the logo on it versus not.
That's not bad.
Let me ask you, what Nick asked, is it not, when a developer turns the street over to us, do they not have to meet not only our specifications on the street itself, but in, all ways, they have to meet Troutman specifications, which would include signage. So, I mean, I'm fine with doing the UDO if that cover ourselves, but to me, I think we're already covered there, I would think, and they wanna go ahead and put up our sign, if they plan to turn it over to us, we wanna go put up our sign, the paddle and the reflective material, and reflective material on the lettering, that's fine. But I think we're already covered on that, when they turn the street over to us.
We are covered on that currently. But again, if you all want the signs put up with the branding there, if we're following our suggestion of once the logo's there, it's ours, then that's not the case. When they start building it, it's not ours to maintain. It's on the developer. So that's why there could be two different signs. And again, y'all don't have to follow our recommendation. If you're saying, hey, do the signage, then we'll just continue explaining like we have been. That street's not turned over to us yet.
So I guess
That would be
another
fine.
option would be that they could put a sleeve over that end of the sign until it's turned over, so they only have to purchase one sign.
They certainly could. Yes,
I mean,
sir.
that would be on the developer at that point, but I think that it would be beneficial for us that when it's turned over, it could be a branded sign, but before that, it can't be branded because it's not our street.
Certainly.
Is there an example of a sleeve out there that, you gotta,
I mean, I don't know, they put them on the highway signs all the time, just a magnet sleeve,
As far as
covers it up.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, I apologize. As far as there being an example of UDO, I did not get up with Andrew and ask to find one. Going back to what Paul said, I do think our UDO would cover us stating what a proper sign is. Either way.
That'd be fine.
Andrew, do you have any points you would like to add?
I think the UDO is fine the way it's written. It's basically saying that, street signs have to be up to the town policy. So if the policy that you guys adopt is something that, changes, that policy's adopted. So I think the UDO language is fine. We'll just start enforcing the new policy.
If they wanna put a sleeve over it, I'm sure, for contractors, they're gonna need signage out there, what street, go to such and such a house or building. So they're gonna need some sort of identification. They put a sleeve over, the town sign, if they, again, don't wanna do but one sign, that's fine. But, they're gonna have to, if nothing else, put something on a piece of cardboard to stick, drive it around, this is Smith Street, this is John Street, for that cheap, I'm scared what kind of house I'm gonna build. Nonetheless, but you know, that's fine. I mean, you know, Andrew thinks, you know, he's supposedly our expert, so it's on him if he doesn't work.
He is, that's
So
correct.
I think what we're saying is, go with the new signage, investigate whether or not a speed can be put on that sign. Again, I would hope it would be something that aesthetically pleasing, and not a plastic bag covering up our logo. But I think that just, and it may be still that the staff has to say to those residents who call, that's still not our street cap.
Yes, sir.
Back to the current signage.
Yes, sir. We will explore.
Next item, anything else on that?
No, sir, thank you.
Next item, overview of the June 13th regular meeting. Mr. Wyatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Roman numeral 2 is consent agenda. The minutes, of course, is normal for you all. Then we go to number 5, consider DRB 2403 facade approval of Smith Village. It should be information in your packet with the DRB report, and they did recommend this. Andrew is here if you all have any questions as to any specifics on that. Hearing none, yes, sir.
This is facade approval for, this is the overall development, or?
This is just one of the buildings that will be on one of the out parcels on the commercial side, we're cross-tying 21 meters. So, there's proposal for probably 2 more buildings. This is just this
That
is
one
a
building.
specific building, so, you'll see the other 2 when they come in, those, LAs.
I thank you for the clarifying question, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
But yes, it's for one specific building, not the entire site. That way, folks that's watching us can understand better what it is.
Do you- I'm sorry, do you want the intersection of Charlotte Highway and Crosstown Lane put on the agenda to clarify it better? Or no?
Say your question again?
Do you want, intersection of Charlotte Highway and Crosstown Lane added to the agenda
No.
for
Ask,
clarification?
Andrew what the parcel number is and put the parcel number, that way everybody knows it's specific.
Okay.
Number 6, consider a request to waive fines for UDO violation at 152 Pine State Road. Again, Andrew, our code enforcement officer, can answer more specific questions. You have been given a department memorandum that should be in your packet. And to summarize, basically put this was rental property. Once our code enforcement officer was made aware through a neighbor that there was a concern or issue, he investigated, he found that the tenants were in violation and then gave notice to the property owner. Unfortunately, state law does not necessarily align with town ordinances on timelines of when things can or will be met. The property owner was always completely cooperative with the town, and they followed an eviction process to kick the tenant out. That time took longer than our compliance part. They did everything they could do, and we're satisfied that the property is in the current state. It was just a few days, I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, that the eviction took longer than our codes allowed for the correction. I think it was $120, is that right?
Depending on if you wanted to use 2 or 3 days, it would be $100 or $150.
So to us, they did what we asked them to do. I think it would be unfair to penalize them even more when they followed the process that the state courts told them to follow. And I do recommend that you all waive those fines. But Andrew and I are both here if you have more specific questions.
It's a big comment that our ordinance, in North Carolina state law conflict that you had in place? What can you?
Well, let me explain that a little more. It's not necessarily that they conflict, it's the process of having an eviction done depends on the court calendar. So sometimes that may take longer for the eviction process to actually be heard and then a decision made by the local magistrate. Most of these wind up in small claims courts unless they're appealed to a higher court. So it's not that our ordinance is in conflict, it's the time frame that our ordinance says comply or be fined. It does not allow that there be a leeway. We don't want to change our ordinance because then, depending on certain individuals, they can say, well, I've been going through the process and 6 months later, there's still not an eviction. In this particular case, they got on the agenda, it just wound up being either 2 or 3 days longer than what our ordinances said that it had to be corrected by.
Let me ask you, just again, for curiosity, if we leave our ordinance the same, which I understand, and the state court takes, even longer than a few days,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a month or two, are we still gonna punish the property owner if he's doing all he can do or she can do, and it's just they can't, get it through the courts, the magistrate, the district court, whatever court's appropriate, are we gonna punish that person, or are we gonna, do this again?
I can say by our ordinances, our code enforcement officer does not have the latitude himself, and we have discussed this before with our town attorney. Even though I have authority to a certain amount, for public transparency's sakes, we have always used the practice anytime there is fines, we would rather you all as a council be involved in waiving those instead of me and or another staff member saying, no, we understand. And 3 years since we have, year and a half since we've had a full-time code enforcement officer, but the 3 years since I've been here, we've been doing this. This is only the third request to have a reduction of fine. 2 of those were denied, 1 property owner paid, and this is only the third one. I don't think it would be a real regular occurrence. Plus, I'm concerned if we modify the ordinance that we would have more people taking advantage of a grace period, if you will, versus us coming back once a year to say, hey, these are the circumstances. Here's our documentation. Here's what they did to rectify it. We would much rather come and make you all aware that a property owner was trying to get in compliance instead of staff or myself being accused of making fines go away because we knew somebody.
I think the key here also is the property owner was communicating.
Yes, sir. 100%.
And this is similar to a more recent issue that we had too, where, it was the fines would continue to be imposed until it was corrected and then addressed on a case-by-case basis, right?
Yes, sir.
As a recent discussion we had.
Yes, sir.
But it seemed like there was a lack of communication
Yeah, in that case,
in that case.
Yeah, in this case, there's been communication, so.
Yes, sir.
Here we are.
And a follow-through on the party side to do what they said they was gonna do. Because that did not happen in the last one. The next one is consider approval of our 2023-2024 year-end budget amendments. I had Justin and I discussed those. You do have the document that points out what these are and why they were requested. Most of it, as you all know, most of you all know, having sit here before, through our audit periods, we have to have the audits done, the months before the new fiscal year starts. So even though we have asked for these amounts, it is to ensure that we have enough funds in each of those items to pay the entire thing. Justin, if you will, do you have your email with you? if you will, summarize your email so that those that are watching or not summarize, read your email so that those watching YouTube can hear what has been shared with council so that everybody sees we're being transparent with the process.
So, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Our year-end budget amendments are included in your packet that you will be receiving today. These are typical year-end budget amendments for the town, but I would like to provide some explanation for these. Overall, for every department, costs were simply higher due to inflation, and many of our vendors increased costs during the fiscal year, which we had no way of knowing in budget prep. As a growing town, it is also hard for department heads and myself to budget just how fast we will grow in the next budget year. Starting with the general fund, we received more revenue than expected, which is obviously good. Like I have said before, I try to budget revenues more on the conservative side. For our expenditures, we are requesting an increase in 104100 governing body for our new clerk software called Granicus, as well as downtown work being done at 149 Wagner. Corvette expenditures also come out of this fund. 104200 is our admin fund, and we added a new employee during the fiscal year, as well as having to pay out vacation for an employee that left. We received more property tax revenue than expected, so we had more tax collected expenses. 104400 is our passport office, and we had more business than expected, so there are more costs associated with that. 104900-004 is what we pay West Consultants cost out of, and we are reimbursed for a lot of these. C10-3550-001 for the revenue side of this that basically offsets the expenditure side. 105100 is our police department fund, and they had more overtime paid out than expected due to the cases that occurred during the fiscal year. 105600 is our street department, and we hired an additional employee to help take care of the greenway. 105600-045 contracted services is what the street paving expenses and speed humps along town come out of. 105800 is our garbage and recycling, and of course everyone is aware of the cost increase that we were hit with during the middle of our budget year. 106200 is our parks and rec department, and with the number of activities that they put on, it requires additional costs. These additional costs are actually offset by the revenue that they have brought in. 106300-044 downtown enhancements is where all the work at 153 Wagner Street has been done. 106500-073 capital outlay buildings is the fund where all expenditures related to the Parks and Rec facility, including the prep work for the shelter and shelter itself comes out of. It is also where we paid for the much-needed parking lot beside Town Hall. Fund 25 is our ongoing ESC Park capital project. This is simply an accounting entry to record the transfer we did last budget year to the park. Fund 30 is our utility fund. On the left column, you can see the increase in water sales, sewer sales, water meter sales, and availability fees. This is a direct result of the growth of the town in the budget year. Because of all the growth, there are simply more expenditures related to that, which is the right column. The expenditures that I would like to highlight are 30-8280-045 and 30-8280-072. 045 contracted services is what we pay our ORT contract out of, as well as the water sewer work done for us by West Consultants. We are reimbursed for a portion of these through AIA grant funding. 30-8280-072 capital outlay building is needed for the work that is being done at the Public Works facility. I just wanted to provide some explanation for these amendments. Please let us know if you have any further questions.
And to expound on what he said with some commentary from my point of view, and you all certainly, please do ask any questions you have. But speaking of growth, when we do the budgets, as we explained during the budget session, we would rather miss the growth numbers by being conservative on what we think the pace will be versus what is happening. If you go back to the Great Recession of 2006-8 period, if we estimated, for example, our growth is on pace at what it is, but then the brakes stop, we would have a major budget shortfall at the end of the year because those growth numbers did not occur. So part of this issue is we on purpose estimate our growth to be shorter, even though when it happens, we get more money, but it causes more expense instead of giving you option in A and B on a budget plan, if that makes sense what I'm saying. Some months we have reached 90-some units a month for install of water and sewer taps. 3.5 years ago, we didn't have 90 in a year. So things like that has been in the last few months, but we are also starting to see that number slow to where we're back in the 50s and 60s regularly. That don't mean that we won't have 90 in August or September. I'm just giving you an example of 3.5 years ago, we did 90 a year. Now there's more months in this past calendar year. We reached that number monthly than ever before. Our passport office, that is self-explanatory as Justin stated. When we opened up that office, we have no fact-based history to say this is how much hours we're going to need to work, even though by passport federal requirements, we have to have 4 of us certified to issue passports. We only use a part-time employee to actually do that labor. Several of us took turns in issuing passports and make sure we're proficient. As a matter of fact, we just got our notice this past week that we are going to be inspected, which means all 4 of us will have to go down and actually go through a passport process and enter it in front of these inspectors when they come here. All of that is extra labor hours, and the fact that the demand for passports was larger than anticipated, that's part of what he's saying the expense there is. I will remind you all and the viewers and citizens that we have, we bought that building because it was in a plan that was adopted in 2017 of what our future growth in Troutman could look like, should look like, with Litton Street Extension and some other things. We also need town space, so part of that for staff. So part of the expenses we have now is getting the passport building brought up to standard to house more employees, not just a part-time person that's issuing passports. So that's part of that as well. I will say we are going to be close to $100,000 net as far as her issuing passports, how much money's come back to Troutman. But because of our expenses of upfitting the building, that is something that's coming out of that fund, not coming out of the general fund, because now there's a profit that we didn't have before to take it out of. West Consultants, just to make sure that you all already know, but to make sure that our citizens that are watching are aware, West Consultants is our engineering firm. If a developer comes in and says, hey, I need to run these plans by you to see if they fit, will you do this, will you do that? By our code of ordinances and our UDO, these have to be checked off by our engineer before we allow people to proceed. They have to reimburse us the cost of that. But because of the development and because of the increase in the use, their fees to us have went up exponentially, even though majority of those fees, somewhere in the tune of 95%, come back to us. The only reason there's a 5% loss, we as a town also use them to confirm what we're doing plan-wise. So there is some of that we make the fees get charged to us, and it's not something that we can pass on to someone else. One of the worst cases we've had in our town in several decades was actually a murder. While to some people, no big deal, you called them, it was a short time, we had a lot of employees working over a 6-week period. Once they made the arrest, that didn't mean the case stopped. we have had an increase in some other crimes that requires more investigation, which is why we've actually hired another admin person to help be here during the day so that our certified officer could be more of an assistant, assisting in these criminal investigations. But that murder case in itself is not something that we have done, nor, like I said, it's been a couple decades since we had one. That was not something that you could plan for in a budget without it being a wasteful guess of a budget. Transfer of duties for employees. As you all know, our plan, as we've discussed in our strategic planning sessions and also during budgets, our public works department was not only handling water and sewer, but they were also handling all facilities maintenance, whether it be town hall, whether it be mowing greenways, whether it be mowing the park. They had been shouldering that responsibility. Obviously, their workload has increased. That's why we asked for new positions in the budget, but also we wanted to shift, as our town grew, the appropriate responsibilities that should not be public works, but transfer them over to the Parks and Rec department. So that's where the one employee was hired that specifically is keeping our town clean and doing things on our greenway, in the park, and general maintenance around the town, like changing the light bulb and some of those things. Public Works still, if it's something beyond their expertise, still comes in and handles some of these issues. So far, knock on wood, we have not had a weather incident to where it required shifting Public Works to come and help, but that is also our backup plan if that's needed. The speed humps, as you all know, we had lots of citizens complain after the budget was passed this past year. Once we installed the speed table up here on Eastway and the speed hump on Eastway, you all and I got a lot of calls from other citizens accusing us of neglecting certain parts of the town that had historically had issues, but we had not addressed them before. So we did go and put in 9 additional speed tables and or humps in other parts of our community to make sure that they were also traffic slowed down there because of the growth. People were taking new routes to get to school, for example, going West Avenue at extremely high rate of speed. So we put several through there. Just that one street was 9, and we actually did 12 total, but there's 9 just right there. Our water and sewer department, specifically, the more people we have, the more water meters we have to buy and maintain. Since COVID, water meters have went up almost 3 times what they originally cost. We have been back to you all previously several times asking for increase in the fees that we could charge developers, but we also have had a plan to change town meters that are aged out to comply with the way a water meter works. The longer it's in the ground, it reads better for the resident and not as good for the town, meaning more water goes through there than not. So we have wanted to upgrade those to where it's more accurate. It does not. In my 3.5 years, we have not had one incident that the water meter itself was in our favor. Not one, except one that was improperly installed by a developer and had the wrong size coupling on it, and it was in our favor, but that was not our fault. We didn't install it. So getting those water meters when the supply is there is also a shot in our arm that was not normal for the budget. But other than that, we'll be happy to answer any other questions you all have. But I just would like to reiterate, we can prepare a budget either way you all like, but I certainly think it's advantageous from our CPA's standpoint and auditing history. We would still rather err on the conservative side in doing a budget and then do budget amendments at the end of the year for the necessities instead of planning those and then having a lot of leftover money. That's what allows our taxpayers to pay the low tax rate that they are without us increasing it to what we think it may be and then having money left over that they're going to demand a refund on their taxes.
Couple of quick questions.
Yes, sir.
10/62/33.
Yes, sir. Parks and Rec departmental supplies.
Yeah, what's that amount? What's the amount?
20,000.
Boy, that's gonna hole punch tenant. I see what you're talking about.
Fund 30, 42,133, and 82,833.
Yes.
Is that water and sewer different department supplies?
Yes, so 30-4200, that is like our admin ladies up front that perform work for water and sewer. So their departmental supplies are things in the office. Whereas Public Works, Austin's guys' departmental supplies is,
In the field.
you know,
So he, Austin's 8280,
yes,
and they're 4200.
correct, yes, sir, yes.
Any other questions for,
Yeah, my question is for the 10/63/044 downtown Hampton.
Yes, sir.
So you mentioned this for the, I guess, the end unit building build out?
There's two buildings there, but yes.
Two buildings.
There's the middle, there's 3 units. We own the end unit and the middle unit.
Are they separate?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So which unit is that for?
That's for both of them. There's not a line item on here that's, one is this item number and the other.
Okay. And then the future requested amount, is there an expected completion date of either of those buildings to be returned to use and rental? They've been under construction for quite a while.
The construction part is twofold. One, they have been. It took us, Mayor Paul may remind me, and Felina, I want to say it took us 1.5 years to even get a general contractor to oversee the project once we started. Once that happened, as Andrew can tell you, then the county changed its permitting system. So even after we hired them and started deconstruction, at no fault of us or them, it was taking 6 to 8 months to get a permit so that they could proceed with the next level. So that alludes to the time frame that you're speaking of. While people saw work going on, the work we could do was work without a permit, and then once permits came back to us, then we attended to those that was permitted. Since we have been issued all the permits, the brunt of the work has been completed within the last 6 months. The end unit, and what we now refer to as the end unit upstairs residential, we just did get our CO on that. It was either 2 Fridays ago or Monday of last week. Part of us purchasing the building and the middle unit was to take care of a tenant that had been a longtime tenant of the previous building owner. They will be moving this week from their unit to this end unit so as not to be displaced, even though it's bigger. Then the demolitions and deconstruction will occur in that unit. The back unit, which would be 151B, is pretty much deconstructed now. The downstairs in 151, which is the middle unit, is deconstructed, but the residential part is not. For ease of going work forward, and there's only been mainly 2 employees doing this work. It's not been a normal construction strike to where you get 15 or 20 people in and knock it out in 2 months. Again, partially because of the permitting, also partially because of our budgeting. But it was a decision that I made, instead of starting to fix 151B, let's wait till we have 151A also deconstructed and then do them both at the same time, to save us cost and labor going forward. Did that answer all your questions, or did I miss something?
I do believe it did.
All right?
Thank you.
Yes, sir?
151B, where's that again?
That's the middle one. 151B, 151 is the middle building. B is the one-bedroom unit closest to Dollar General. A is the one-bedroom unit that faces Wagner Street. They're both upstairs.
Okay. Right now, they're both, of course, vacant. She said that one tenant has been moved to the,
151A is moving this week.
okay.
And let me also say this for the record. The back staircases are not complete and will not be complete. They have been ordered, but they will be metal also to complement what the front of 153 looks like, so that it will be aesthetically appealing and functional from both any viewpoint that you have. So even though I say we have the CO for 153A, it is not finished as far as the work goes, because that staircasing will be replaced.
So A, there is no back unit in 153A.
That is correct. It's just a two-bedroom upstairs unit. Yes, sir.
So there'll just be one rental on 153.
That is correct. Well, there'll be two.
Eventually.
Only one for the residential. The downstairs, we intend on being business commercial.
Right, but a residential.
Yes, sir.
Just one.
That's correct. And one example, just to explain, because I'm sure we'll have people review and say we're not managing time. One example of construction work continuing, we had cabinets ordered for 153A for over 3 months. And then nothing was happening, and I said, let's change cabinet makers. And then we got them done within 6 weeks. So we have had some sub-trades that have not done as they were supposed to do timeline-wise. That's the other reason the process has taken longer. It's not that we've not been paying attention. It's because of COVID. You hear every excuse under the sun with supply and demand, and then everything else happens.
So with 151, A and B, is that going to continue to be a split unit up there?
Yes, sir.
Are both accesses from the back?
No, sir. 151A will be accessed from the front on Wagner Street side.
Let me correct myself, 153.
153 is from the Dollar General side only. The entrance that used to be on Wagner has been blocked up and removed. It gave more square footage for the unit by doing so.
Any other questions on the budget amendment?
That's all we have on consent agenda. Number 3, Roman numeral 3 rather. Number 8, Jason Edwards, as I said earlier, was our in-town employee of the month. Austin will be presenting that information to you Thursday night. And then number 9, that is what it is. Roman numeral 4, new business, system development fee analysis. This is what Benji had proposed to us. It's required statute-wise that there be a review of your system development fees and what the town charges. We will have to have a public hearing, and then you all would consider adopting the resolution entitled Adopting a Water and Sewer System Development Fee for Analysis. I would just like to remind you all, after that was posted, as we're required to do, and per an email that I sent you all, Benji did answer both of those questions. I need to confirm if he already sent those to those individuals, or if that's something that our town clerk will need to do tomorrow, if you'll make that
Okay.
question, because they should be responded to. I will just say there was a misunderstanding of both of those individuals and thinking that the system development fee somehow translates into their monthly water bill. It does not, except if we do not adjust our system development fees in the future, then yes, water and sewer goes up because we're having to pay for the allotments of capacity that we get from one of our neighboring municipalities. But increasing these sewer development fees, that means somebody building new construction has to pay the higher price because we anticipate we will need more water and more sewer. I'll be glad to answer any questions on that if you all have. Number 11, request by Jeremy Shaw, owner of Cedar Stump Pub. I did speak with Mr. Shaw. I appreciate him at least going through the process to be considered. I invited him to bring whatever materials that he would like to discuss this. The only thing that I will say there that I did discuss with him, and I believe I put in my manager's notes to you all, if I get to the right page, I can confirm I did. Yes, was that that town property, even though it is the passport office building, years ago when it was the cleaners, for whatever reason, I can only assume, and I just lost his name, Mayor. What was that gentleman's name that owned the cleaners? Yes, Mr. Campbell. I can only assume there was an extra lot that he later purchased. I honestly have not researched it to verify that, but the front portion is zoned for business. The back portion is zoned for residential. Andrew found that in a map when we was considering the request. So even if you all wish to entertain something with him, and I explained to him, the process would have to be, one, I'm against, my recommendation is against selling the property, and the reason that is, we purchased it because it met the 2017 plan of our future. It does not make sense to me that we would then sell part of that property if indeed it's part of our future growth and street area. If you all decided, okay, we don't have to sell it, but let's lease it, then the town would have to apply itself to have a zoning reclassification to that property. But it never should have been, regardless of how it came to be 6 or 7 years ago. This exterior area that has been used by them has always been illegal and not in compliance. So going forward, and this is what I explained to him in the end of April, telling him to have the items off by June 1st, was the fact that it can't exist. It's against code, it's against our own rules. Not count the liability, as our town attorney has told us before, of alcohol being there, and that's also against our ordinances that town-owned property, the only time alcohol is allowed is special events that you all approve ahead of time. I'll be glad to answer any questions on that. Yes, sir.
So what's currently going on at that location then right now?
Unfortunately, I had to leave before the last meeting, so I can't say. I had given him notice to be vacated by June 1st. But he did follow my recommendation, and that's if he wanted to appeal or discuss with you all my decision to come before town council. I think that's what his intent was. It was not to ignore what I told him. It was to plead his case before you all if they could be an alternative. I don't think he's ignoring me on purpose. I think he's hoping that there is another alternative that he can follow.
Well, that's kind of not what I'm asking, sir.
Okay.
What I'm asking, what, is that being used right now?
Yes, sir, it is.
Tonight, okay?
I would assume so.
So alcohol then is coming out of this business, okay, going out to our town property, and being consumed there.
Yes, sir.
I mean, how is that insurance-wise?
Well, our insurance carriers are not happy, and that's why they recommended that we ask the business to stop using the
Cease and
property.
desist.
Yes, and we have given that notice. However, everything is not just as simple as stop now, or you can or you can't. Unfortunately, this was one of those uses, even though illegal, had been in existence for several years. He had not been given any previous notice until the town purchased the property, and then we started fact-finding as to what the options were or were not. We have had one neighbor complaint and 2 general complaints from the area. One concerned specifically to our liability, the other complained about the business. I do think, in speaking with our planning director and speaking with the business owner, they have leased additional space there that used to be the Subway. The intent is to go in and rebuild, remodel that area to also be able to serve food to their patrons, and then possibly add an extended outdoor patio on that area. Going back to what our town attorney said, roughly a year ago, I think, what do you call the downtown social districts? That is getting to be more popular in towns, to have a downtown social district. I think the business owner's intent is to at least follow our rules and ordinances to be in compliance with that, but maybe install some type of a short fence that lets his patrons know this is his property. At current time, we do not have ordinances that allows somebody to walk from one business to the next with a cup. Most social districts do require that they be in a non-breakable type cup. We do not have that, but if that business, and I do suspect that he would like to do that in the future, but we will be working on an ordinance that may allow that if you all tell us to proceed for that downtown, because we have one other business that's there. There may be one more coming, but didn't mean to go out and way right field to your question, but that's the intent.
What you've told me though, liability-wise, we're playing roulette every day this goes on.
Well, I think we can show as a town that we have done what we need to do as far as notifications. The business is insured. Gary can tell you more about what happens once we tried to dissolve ourselves of liability if an incident did occur. But yes, sir, I understand exactly what you're saying. All I can say is we are collectively, staff-wise, trying to work toward that not being the case.
I think the question for Thursday night is, which is, I think was a request from the property owner was, number one, do we want to sell the property?
Sell or lease, yes, sir.
Lease the property. So I think council needs to be prepared to respond to that request. So,
But in the meantime, though, Mr. Mayor, this is still continuing going on our property, where a sale could take a substantial amount of time. So I think right now,
Well,
we need to decide what's going on our property.
yeah, well, what I would say to that
We
is,
could say we'll sell it tomorrow, but it's still gonna take time, and still that is being used on our
well,
property,
what I was gonna
what
say.
I'm concerned
No,
about.
I don't want to interrupt you, but to my point is, on Thursday night, if you decide to sell it, you can say, we're gonna sell it, but you have to cease and desist utilization of that property at this time.
Or if you decide you're not selling it or leasing it,
It needs to cease and desist.
It needs to desist, exactly.
And then the other option, if we decide, do we lease it? I mean, because I understand we don't buy property to turn around and sell it, that's not.
if you want to go to leasing, I would talk to our town attorney as to how that still places us in the liability loop, but it's certainly an option.
Yeah, I mean, it would, I mean, if somebody gets badly hurt there, they're gonna go after everybody they can go after. You can require insurance of, you know, $1 million or more kind of thing on them. So you can insure and you can put language in there that they're gonna indemnify and hold the town harmless for anything that occurs. So language can go in there. The problem is, you know, somebody gets hurt, they're belly up and can't do anything at that point in time, it's still gonna come back on the town. So there's clearly, especially with alcohol involved, there's an exposure liability.
I mean, is that any different than our town events at park that have alcohol, or somebody just, it doesn't matter if he leases the property or not, there's no fence, there's no line deciding, you know, showing, where the property line is, so somebody even cutting through, like the, you know, the machete wielding guy, if he would've fallen on his own machete, that's a liability to the town's expense, because he was on the property at the time.
Well,
I mean, there's certain liabilities that exist just because the property exists. I understand that it's kind of increased when a business is operating on the property, but it's the whole purpose of contracts and insurance, and then the, you know, this incredible legal system that we have and judicial decisions and everything else, so.
but unless we go back and change our town ordinances, there's not a lease that can work. A sale could, but unless we change our town ordinances, even leasing the property would not work. And yes, to your point, what happens if one of our events that were sponsored, and we can talk about this for hours. And of course, Gary has a lot more experience in the courtroom. But basically, people can sue for most anything to a degree, but the town, when we do have events, we purchase an extra insurance. We don't just keep going. And we do post rules. So in those situations, if somebody is injured or otherwise harmed, as long as we're following our rules and we have posted those, then that does indemnify us to a certain degree. This situation, we're not corresponding with anybody, and we're not ensuring that anybody's being told. We would put some type of fencing on our property going forward to let people know, don't cross this boundary. Then if they do, they're trespassing. But that's no different than our park after hours. If somebody wants to hop the fence and go down there with a case of beer, but we have done what we should do to let people know that it's not a public area and you shouldn't be here. And that's what we would do here. We have not, because we have owned the property a short period of time, and again, it already existed when we bought the property. So that's what we have been working on almost a year now, is to find out what our liabilities are, what legally can we do, even though there was not a written lease, was there a verbal agreement they had pending, or are we liable for it, et cetera, et cetera. Getting somebody at the insurance company to finally answer us as to what was there. I think it may have been in the winter that Gary explained to us the liability part about the alcohol, because it's already against our ordinance. So once all that was confirmed, that's why I gave notice in April to be out by June 1st.
So the option, I guess what I heard there is, when we regain control of that property and he removes his stuff, is to put up fencing at a cost to the town, just to declare the property line, instead of maybe changing an ordinance to lease to generate income until that area is developed further down the road.
Again, if we lease, there's an additional expense to the town because our ordinances do not allow alcohol even in a leasing circumstance. It don't allow that. So we're gonna have to right.
I'll need further understanding of that. So is it because the ordinance needs to be
Alcohol is
changed?
not allowed on town property. So you'd have to change that ordinance
Except
under
by
a leasing
special
situation.
event.
Pardon?
Except by a special event permit,
Correct.
right?
That-
Because it's,
That would not be a special event.
That is, I think it is, that is operated by us. the town.
Yes, sir, that is correct. A town event ran by the town, yes.
So I couldn't just go out there and say, hey, I wanna have a event in the park, and I wanna have alcohol at the park.
yeah. So when the town does have an event, whose alcohol license do we use? Or whose have we used in the past?
What we have the last 3 years is Iredell County Fraternal Order Police. They are the applicant that applies for the permit, and they or their volunteers are the ones responsible for serving the alcohol. And that's a state permit showing the nonprofit status, that's the other thing, nonprofit status, otherwise you don't get one.
Right.
And then the individual named has to have a background, et cetera.
And that's still even further, the town's not necessarily running it, but the nonprofit is sponsoring it.
The town is responsible by that permit to oversee
Right,
that,
the operation.
yes.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
and grants permission for a very short window of time for it to be done. Again, that's an ABC requirement, not a town rule.
there's always risk with everything, so if y'all decide you wanna lease it to them, we just have to put language in there, and you'd have to change your ordinance on. And then I think he can apply as a leaseholder for a change of zoning, cause it's an equitable interest.
And I'm only asking these questions just because some of the things I've seen since November, December, rendering of future downtown usage and the buildings that we do own and are renovating with outdoor seating and other things, presumed alcohol consumption, that would be a town-owned property at that point, the rentals that, no?
I'm not familiar
So
with
there
this
was
thing.
a video that we watched, I wanna say December, of a virtual rendering of downtown with seating right there in front of 153A,
Yes,
of, tables, maybe a little guarded area where people could sit outside and dine. Maybe future usage, but that would be a presumption of alcohol consumption if somebody's sitting outside and dining, and also being town property. And then relative to, the properties the town does own, the homes and the private consumption of alcohol and other paraphernalia.
and Gary can speak to it more if he desires. Renting residential property versus renting business property is different than what our town ordinances are and the intent of the ordinances. As far as the renderings you're speaking of, we had December, January, yes, that did show restaurant style dining, no alcohol presumed, but somebody could. And again, I'm not trying to be for or against you all's decision in this matter. I am just stating for the facts that we have to change ordinances, we have to do other things. The difference is, since the property owner was told to remove the items, he now has additional space that he can lease. He now has additional space that he can build an alcohol serving consumption area that did not exist prior. So to me, as a town manager recommending to you all, he's got options now that he didn't have at the time.
And some of my questions aren't necessarily for this case.
Totally understand.
But potentially even moving forward. is
Totally
there,
understand.
Do we need to have some kind of ordinance language for, the properties that we do own for future usage, and even to encourage such usage as a restaurant? If we're making a decision now that absolutely no commercial property the town owns will have alcohol consumption on it, you just shot yourself in the foot with those building renovations.
Again, it can, what ifs and what abouts all day. I can say from all the inquiries we have to rent town-owned building space, there has been a couple interest with alcohol being involved. The majority, by far, is no alcohol at all. So once it comes time, it certainly can be addressed at that time, but the intent of what council was is hopefully either retail business and or food service business. Once those options are there and we're able to get tenant options and see what's out there, I think one of the things that we mentioned was you want a long-term rental, a minimum of a 3-year, but preferably a 5-year contract with some type of guarantee. While we want to promote businesses starting out, for example, it makes no sense for us to take a building and then say, hey, you want to come in here and spend this much money in it, but then they're coming back taking bricks off the wall because they're having to get anchor bolts out because their business flopped in 8 months like some others in this town has done. So I think a lot of that matters in going forward. And again, you can go in as deep in that well as we need at the time.
I think that we'll have further discussion in the future.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know that we fully baked this in terms of what those buildings will be. And again, I think it'll depend on, you know, what's part in front of us, but I think we were just kind of at step one.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
all I was kind of
Yeah,
asking you to do is, you know, what do we need to look at
Yeah.
for the future?
Sure.
Now, I mean, the decisions we make now are gonna kind of shape the future,
Yes, sir.
or the perception of it.
Yes, sir.
How much, right now, that's, using the back deck?
Sir?
Nobody, you're using the back deck behind the cedar stone, back deck,
Yes.
where the property line cuts
Yes.
across. How much of that is, our property on that back deck?
It's 20 or 30 foot, maybe.
Percentage of the deck?
Total square foot, the whole stage that they have for music, outside music, that whole stage is on our property. Total square footage wise, kind of a weird triangle, I would say maybe 500 square foot.
Well, you third of the deck, half the deck,
The whole deck is on our property.
the whole deck's on our property.
Yes, sir.
The stage, and that's just the perform, it's
I
like.
mean, I'll be honest with you, I haven't been out there, so I'm asking, I guess I ought to go up there and just see it. But you're saying the whole deck is on town property,
That is correct.
okay?
It'd be worth seeing.
Yeah.
And I only say that because the stage, likely people aren't drinking, they're singing and playing
Well,
instruments.
You missed that one meeting where somebody was here saying everybody was not only drinking, but other stuff.
Let me ask you then, so you said a stage, is there not space out there for people to come out and sit, drink, and?
At one time, they literally had stumps that somebody could sit on a stump. I too have not been by there in several months. The fire marshal showed up, issued violations for numerous things. Mr. Shaw got all those in compliance within about a 10-day period. Got all those in compliance. Some like drop cords and extension cords, there's lighting, there's all kinds of things that were not into code. Once he was noticed of violations, he got all those into compliance. But how they're sitting now, or if it's just a standing area, I honestly, at one time they had like 2 or 3 people tables to where you could have the outdoor chairs, but I've not been there in at least 3 months to see what is happening since. I don't-
Even if this is, oh, go ahead.
So at least some people are coming out, standing, listening to the band or something, on this, but again, even where the people are standing, in addition to the deck, all of that is on town property.
Yes, sir, and that's why the one residential neighbor complained the most, because during the weeknights, they would like to go to sleep at a normal hour instead of having outside music and loud people keeping them up till 10 or 12 midnight, because it's outdoor activity.
Okay, now, you're saying with the additional down subway area, he's gonna have additional, as far as an outside deck, if he wants to do an outside deck there, he can do it.
Yes, sir.
And be on Subway property or Miguel's property, whoever.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
He would have to get up with planning and zoning to follow the building code, but yes, there is ample room there for it to be on that end of the building, which is farther away, and then brick walls in between the residential area.
Oh, I know I was gonna ask, I hope this is not a silly question, but let me ask this first. Do we have photos that we could look at? And/or would it be appropriate to go look at it?
I'll be happy to get photos if you would like, or when we leave today, we can drive down and look at it, either one.
Well, I mean, I was gonna ask him, and I'd like to go with the rest of them, to go as a group or what have you. But, Jeremy did make a comment, and I know you had excused yourself, our last meeting, but he did say he would come back with a, PowerPoint. So, I'm presuming he's gonna have pictures, I don't know, but even with that, I wouldn't mind, if it's just you and me, or Lena and the rest, I mean, that's up. But I would like to go over and look at it.
Sure.
I went in for the ribbon cutting, I've been inside the building for, a year or two or something, but as far as the deck and all that back, I have never been out there except looking at it from the Wagner Street. And so, that's why I'm asking these questions.
And he and I talked about that too. I think some of these business owners are frustrated that we as staff, you all as elected officials, are not in there more often. But Mr. Shaw certainly understands the few times that I did go in there, people's got their phones out trying to take my picture like I'm doing something criminal. And I mean, I've already been accused of being arrested drunk driving, so I can only imagine what would happen if they actually saw me in there consuming the beverage. So we have agreed that I'm visiting his other place in another county. That way it's not in our jurisdiction. But I think not just this, and he did not voice a complaint, by the way, but I do think some of our citizens have frustrations that we're not there. But at the same token, I also reiterated with some of these people's comments, I don't know that both of us drinking alcohol would be a good time to discuss town issues.
So again, I think folks, council needs to consider it, go out, take a look at it, and we can make a request to, a response to Mr. Shaw's request on Thursday.
That brings us to I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, next item, please.
Item number 12, request rezoning applicant Atlas Principals LLC 13.55 acres. This is South Main. They have requested that we postpone this for a month. You all certainly can give us that directive now, or as you all have done in the past, I would suggest, being it's already been advertised, and this is Andrew prodding me, being it's already been advertised, that you all open up the public hearing and then simply postpone it to resume at next month's meeting. That way they don't have to go through the entire re-advertising process.
Is there a reason for the request?
Yes, sir. To be candid and blunt, they asked me what I thought of the project, and I explained I thought that it was not going to fly too good based off of planning and zoning board's opinions and comments. They asked me if there was anything they could do that would make it more favorable. I used an analogy of, yes, what's in it for our citizens, and they started talking about green space, and I candidly said, I don't think 99% of our citizens care how much green space you got. What are you doing to improve the way of life for our citizens? Specifically, I talked about some of our citizens off Byers Road, and I just lost the name of the neighborhood right there. Jacobs Woods, yes. I said that we already have several citizen complaints about that intersection and getting out during prime hours or getting in during prime hours. And I suggested they consider offering a traffic signal to help mitigate those issues. As part of that, also include a driveway with the church's permission so that the church on Sundays and/or because they have a daycare center could also use that stoplight. At this point, they said, let us crunch the numbers and see if this is something that we can do and if the project will happen. They asked me a rough cost estimate. I said somewhere in the neighborhood of 175 to 300,000. And Andrew can correct that number if he would like, but I think that's the general, what we have been told traffic signals or stoplights cost. Again, I promised them nothing, but I told them based off of the pulse and feedback that I was hearing from the community and planning and zoning, that those extra 9 units, they would need something to show what they're doing to benefit our community. They did ask, we can build 40, and I said, well, not necessarily. That's in our land use plan, but that still don't mean your project would be approved. But basically, to answer your direct question, they're taking the information that I suggested and or trying to find other options of what they think can benefit the rest of our citizens, not just that project.
All right, thank you.
Item number 13, annexation request, non-contiguous applicant William and Samantha Deal. This is 2.02 acres, South Main Street. Basically, all the property surrounded it is already in our town limits and has been zoned. If you've got any specific questions, I'll be happy to address that. Then if so approved for annexation, number 14 would then be the mandatory rezoning that we have to give the property. I will say as a caveat that some of our anti-growthers out there are dead fast against anything. This is a perfect example of 2 acres that if for some reason we don't annex it, that don't mean that it's not going to be built. It just means that it'll be built in the county, not our town limits. Also, depending on what the potential purchaser wishes to do with the property, regardless of what he's already telling people he's doing with the property, that has to go through and have a separate approval process. Has nothing to do with the annexation and the rezoning. Nothing to do with that. I'll be glad to answer any questions on that.
ETJ, is that ETJ?
It is not ETJ.
Okay, that's all we're going with.
You alluded to a property owner and what they might do with it. What are the expectations they have?
I'll be glad to answer your question. Just know Thursday night, that part can't be discussed as it's irrelevant. But for now, they're talking about doing a car wash and on half of the site, and then the other half would be an office building, basically.
And if we turn it down, that person can still go to the county and get it approved.
If it's in our town limits, no. If it's not in our town limits, yes.
Okay. Didn't we say that we wouldn't annex something, just then turn it down?
2 different things here. This is annexing and rezoning based off of its current use. It is not rezoning to allow a car wash.
Okay. That
2
person's
different
still
things.
gonna have to come to the town to get permission for the car wash.
Yes, sir.
But since it's not an ETJ, we can't rezone first and then annex. We gotta annex. He's in, whether we rezone or not, he's in. Or don't rezone to his, what he wants, the potential product purchase.
But go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you.
As mentioned, this is a straight rezoning, so you're not supposed to take any specific use into this permit. So if that was to be applied for, they would have to have another public hearing in front of our board of adjustment.
Okay, thank you. That's clarification.
So the annexation and rezoning has nothing to do with that project specific. They can't build it just because if you all choose to annex it and rezone it. That was 13 and 14. Number 15, annexation request non-contiguous, applicant Gerardo Cruz, 1.227 acres off of East Mumbo. Basically they are wanting water and sewer, or water, not sewer, water services. And because of one of our previous policies, to get our water, they need to annex it. Any questions on that?
I just have one question. Are the other properties located adjacent to that annexed in? So these are the only two lots of, is there 5 or 7
Yes.
that are annexed in?
And each individual property owner has the, right to
Yeah.
come in and ask, it's just they haven't, they've just built them well.
Okay.
So,
I will say the property is in our future growth plan of town limits, and the annexation request and the rezoning still keeps it residential. It is not to change the quantity of residential. It still meets our land use plan, the way Andrew and I have discussed.
Is there already water running through there?
There is water near there. I will also say this, even if there was not, they would have to pay to get the water. We don't run the line just because they ask. Yes. Any additional questions on that matter? Number 17, text amendment to amend Article 6.2.2, multi-tenant signs of the Troutman UDO. Andrew is here to explain.
yeah, this is a request from, the sign company that's working with the food line out there, requesting an additional 2 feet in our height limitation for a multi-tenant shopping center sign. These are signs for developments that are at least 50,000 square feet. And, their basic gist of doing this is, allowing some bigger panels. Traffic moves pretty quickly through that area, so we were thinking safety terms, being able to see the signs a little bit better. My recommendation was to approve. I don't see 2 feet as being that large of an ask. And, planning board did recommend adding additional language, something by the lines of adding an aesthetical cap to the top of the sign. Basically some kind of element at the top of the sign, just, making it a little bit more pleasing, maybe a different color or material that's not part of the regular sign. And, I think the applicant was, they were fine with that addition. And, I included a picture into the packet of what that would look like.
This is for the recommendation,
Yes.
the picture.
So, but that's just a basic gist on this.
Is there a limitation to how close or where it can be on the corners or on the road?
It cannot be in the side triangle, so basically, depending on where that right of way is, and then it's also gotta be at least 5 feet off the property line.
Whether it, states the building 50,000, it's a single building, 50,000 square feet or more.
It's a multi-tenant building.
That's what it's in it, single building,
Uh,
50,000 square feet or more.
It can
It
include.
can't be a multiple building,
Yeah,
a total of 50,000 square feet or more, which is, I mean,
yeah. It can include actually multiple buildings, because the definition of shopping center is at least one building. So, for instance, if it's on one parcel and you had like a Food Lion and say Target or something on there, that would meet the shopping center definition. So,
even though they're single,
yes.
they're not attached, they're single, but if they combine, 50,000 square feet or more, then it meets the, okay.
Do we have any other properties that fall into that window currently?
We don't at this time.
We-
There's potential for, something, we've heard some stuff, just the Northwest property, maybe. Lowe's technically isn't a shopping center by this definition, because I don't think the building is about 50,000 square feet. It's by itself on one parcel. However, the Lowe's sign exceeds 12 feet, so the sign that's already there for Lowe's It's kind of, the sheet sign is taller than 12 feet in height, so it's, this
I
one.
was on planning and zoning when, then council, I wasn't on it, then did that, I remember that. It kind of,
Was that
Makes
kind of
sense.
like a per use approval back then, or?
I imagine the ordinance was just different back at that time. I think when the.
that was done by different council, different circumstances. I was on planning and zoning, didn't quite understand the, I'm not saying more, but it was just, behind the scenes.
So this would be a complete change to our UDO text amendment to allow this moving forward. And it would also apply to if there were any buildings. Now, did you say it has to be a shopping center?
That's right.
Or is it just a building constructed over 50,000 square feet?
It's got to meet that shopping center definition in the ordinance and have at least 2 businesses.
Okay. And we don't have a north end property here that is over 50,000?
Well, I don't think we do, but when you're looking at these properties over here on Main Street, they're just so line compliant and everything, because they're so old. It's kind of tough to have a comparison of
Okay,
what we're seeing down the other.
I understand.
But it has to, as you say, come under shopping center specification.
I'll make sure that you all make a decision on this. I don't need any ties or anything, because I will then have to recuse myself, just to make sure you're aware.
Oh, okay.
We, as staff, do recommend approval because of the totality of the circumstances. Regardless of who the tenant would be or the future project, as Andrew appropriately explained, 10-foot versus 12-foot. I don't know that any of us have an engineering degree that can say why it should not be. But it certainly does not allow everybody to go and do that unless they meet the shopping center criteria.
And I guess the only question I have, the design here is, I mean, it looks like substantial pillars on either side of the sign. Is that in the verbiage that there has to be a certain border? Or could they go side to side and this could just be a sign with no brickwork on the bottom with a roof on top?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's fine. No, there's no elemental requirements minus that little, that recommendation the planning board had about the aesthetic path.
I will also state that the permit required, there has to be a permit and it has to be so many feet below ground. Depending on the type of material above ground determines how the construction has to happen below ground. So it's not just as put wood up versus steel. All that changes how the sign is built based off of what sign they put in. And the permit standards are already there for different building materials.
Like we won't have a sign like the old dealership down there by 77 that's
Exactly.
sinking in. I guess the question I was asking was alluding to, this could be, of this size, could be a complete digital sign, side to side.
No.
There's
And then,
limitations to the visuals. You're only allowed to go a certain square footage.
And speak up just a little bit.
Sorry, as far as like your digital signs, I think there's a limitation on square footage. So the whole sign would not be able to be digital. It could be interior illuminated, but as far as going all digital, no. There's, I can look into that language and get that together.
and I ask because I mean, I would hate to see an LCD screen that size with a circus on it.
Yes. But we do have limitations to digital signs.
Gary, did you start saying something a while ago on, concerning our discussion?
No.
Excuse me.
Our last item is number 18. When I was doing my notes, Kim had sent me something that had Justin's name, and apparently on my screen, it flip-flopped the two. If you will see in yours, 18 is proposed budget, but it has me and Andrew Ventresca presenting it. I'm sure Andrew is real happy about that. I apologize because I'm the one that, I do recall changing, I didn't know why Justin needed to help me with a text amendment, so it apparently showed up different. So Kim will correct that to be Justin, who's going to be on hot seat as our CPA financial person.
But in my draft, it shows Wyatt and Justin, but on the manager's notes, it shows Ben Justin.
Yeah, I probably just didn't change it on the one.
Good, so it was her fault, not mine. I'm glad you
It
pointed
was,
that
it
out.
was my fault,
I was taking credit for something and she wanted to confess.
but
That's a good
good.
employee that will accept credit.
That's exactly right. I will say, public-wise, I have not had any conversation of in-depth about any particular item on our budget. I have been asked general questions, is there an increase? But the most important one they want to know is my taxes going up. And I said, well, yeah, if the county makes them go up, but we as a town are not. But I've not had anybody else reach out and ask me about any item in our budgets. I have had a few to comment that they appreciated you all in our budget workshops. Several have went back and viewed either articles that were written and or have asked department directors direct questions. But again, I do think it's a conservative budget, worst case scenario of how we have been doing business. But I'll be glad to answer any questions now if you have them. If you all have any for us between now and Thursday, feel free to ask myself or Justin, and we certainly can address those in my comments when I formally ask you for your blessings to pass it.
You want me to pass out this stuff?
Sir?
You want me to pass out these?
Oh,
This
yeah.
is the sample.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Jerry's not here to give you final approval, but yes.
And then Nick's numbers, what he had.
Yes, and yes.
Thank you.
Nick has asked us, I'm sorry, Councilman Jarozinski has asked us to have projected growth numbers. What does that translate to? There's several in his own research, how different people are coming up with different things. Justin came up with those and will be happy to explain more in depth than what I'm getting ready to generally say. But several of you veteran council members understand from our 2020 census of 3,700 and some people, realistically, but today's water customers, we feel like we are more than double that. With the building permits that are already, let me rephrase that, with the developments that are already approved, then that number too should double within the next 5 to 10 years. That makes us a very fast growing town. I will only caution to say that we have to make swags, and if y'all don't know what a swag is, please do look that up. I don't want to say it on public record. It's a scientific guess. But based off of expertise, I will use Colonial Crossing as an example. Councilman Hinkle was on the council when that project was first approved in its original form somewhere around the year 2000. It took them almost 20 years to actually get it to its final phase and actually start building. So just because some of our projects have been approved, depending on the economy and what's happening worldwide, some of these may be decades away before they come to reality. Other ones we do see are moving faster and more progressive. So it is hard for us, for example, to say, okay, our population's double now, we need double staff, we need double vehicles, we need double parks, we need double town hall buildings, we need double everything. It does not work that way. And a layman person would expect us to show what the relative numbers are. Well, if you increase this much, why have you not increased staff? Well, as you all know, the main reason we haven't increased staff, one, we needed to make sure that growth was going to continue. Two, we don't have the square footage space to put the staff in, even if we were to hire them and get effective, productive work out of the employees. Some people, like Austin's department, I'll even use Parks and Rec, 90% of their job is outside. It's not in the office, but both departments still have to do a certain amount of inside work, preventative maintenance, education, a couple other things. So we still need, it's not just saying, well, give them a lawnmower and tell them to go get it. With the requirements for us to take care of our employees, you're looking at an average of about 15 to 20% of a work week is admin time, whether that's taking the mandated annual trainings or whether that's getting them to get the appropriate certifications we want somebody to have. And I appreciate that. Having said that, let me take just a brief caveat. For the first time since I've been here, we actually have all employees in the public works with some form of public works certification. First time ever. I appreciate Austin being very productive and instilling my policies, not only by himself, but to his employees, that we are getting these various water and sewer certifications and or other certifications that help them enhance their job performance so that we're not having to subcontract outside people to come in and do certain work. Same thing with the police department. Same thing with Parks and Rec. How many of you all realize, I know Council Lady Harris knows, but how many of the rest of you all realize you can't just sit somebody on a lawnmower and say, go mow grass and go kill weeds. You've got to have certifications on who can spray the weed killer. It's not like people doing it at home. Because we have the public interaction with these facilities, they have to be certified. They have to be able to inspect park equipment. They have to make sure that the bolts are still on things. So it's not just go work outside and mow grass. That being said, with our projected growth numbers, what do we as staff look at in trying to be better prepared for that growth? As you all already know, we have already started the process of trying to identify the minimal square footage that we need to build a town hall. A general concept of what staff is going to be inside that building, and just as important, can the building be expanded in future growth situations if our growth trend continues on the pace that it is now. Anything else you want to say on the numbers wise?
I'm not gonna take credit for this, because this isn't my work, this is Councilman Drzezinski's. So, just, if you wanna look at these numbers and digest them or whatever, but honestly, looking at, the, Stallings area, and we talked about that briefly, but, I mean, as fast as we're growing, I don't really know how to necessarily project that to be exact, but I would say we're going to at least double from that 8,700 in the next 3 to 5 years, and that's probably
7 years. 7 years. Let's be conservative.
okay. 7 years. So by 2030, 2031, and then 2040, I'd say, well, we could double from there, but that's hard to project.
You all have been making obviously appropriate decisions when it comes to our growth. I don't know that we will ever appease all of our citizens in trying to explain, one, the old adage, if you're not growing, you're dying. A lot of people don't know what that really means. What it means for government is every year people that are working on a job want a raise. Every year people working a job want some type of a better benefit, whether it's more vacation time, whether it's better insurance plans, or some other tangible work enhancement. Government is no different than the private sector. Every year our expenses to provide the same services per employee hour goes up. So if we do not have the growth coming in that will help balance what that cost structure is, then taxes have no choice but to increase. Our intent is not to increase taxes, but our intent is also to provide the services that you all direct us to because of what your constituents are telling you. So just because our population has doubled, I'm very thankful to staff that our costs have not doubled, but that is allowing us, for the first time in our history starting last year, to save significant amounts of money to go toward the cost of some of these things we know we have to need in our future, as such as a town hall building and a remodel of this building to be a standalone police department. But does anybody have any other questions on those growth numbers? Councilman Jarosinski, is there anything we missed that you would like to point out for co-counsel?
I am concerned there's only 8.6 people in Mooresville in 1980.
Sir, I'm sorry?
I said, I'm concerned there was only 8.6 people in Mooresville in 1980.
So the disclaimer in the 1980 numbers are times by 100.
I was gonna say that was 8,600.
Yeah, move it over.
And Randy Marion and I have talked about that on a regular basis. That 35 years ago, Mooresville only had less people than what we have now.
Thousands, I'd say. It's 8.6 thousand, 8,600.
The 8.6 were all related.
It hadn't been that long
I was
ago.
gonna say,
It hadn't been long ago. Exit 36 was farmland. You had two convenience stores, which are still there. Well, one's, I think, torn down now maybe. Anyhow, you had two convenience stores. That was it.
If I may sidebar for a little story, but it's appropriate. My wife's grandfather owned property on 150. A local guy went out and bought property near the interstate on exit 36. Ernest Neal was my wife's grandfather. He was laughing. He said, "You're an idiot. They have been trying to grow the crops there for 5 decades. Nothing will grow on that property. You're an idiot." And he said, "Well, you know, I think I got a couple ideas. We're going to see what happens." And about 2 years later, the gentleman was celebrating his crop. And Ernest said, "I just drove by there. There's nothing growing. Not even grass will grow on that property. You're an idiot." He said, "Ernest, I have went and growed me a Wendy's, and it's coming." So people's got different theories on what crop is actually going to pay. But that's a true story that's occurred with that property.
I would say, you know, I just provide these numbers for us to consider in future decisions and decisions we're making now, just as the growth trends of the rings around Charlotte and how, you know, some of it is, you really can't stop certain amounts of growth when you're located in such a large city, and it's gonna come, and it's how can we adjust to it and just, you know, transition it more towards what we're looking for out of it, for the community, for the town.
And I will add, Councilman Jarosinski heard me Saturday have a duck moment with some people. What a lot of these people that are commenting on social media do not understand is we as a town do not involuntarily annex anything. That's not the rule. Years ago, it was allowed in North Carolina. It has been illegal 16 years now.
Well, you can still do it, but people have to be able to vote to come in.
Correct.
Yeah.
But the statute changed it to stop the involuntary without there being other things. 16 years?
Oh,
And that being the case, we're not involuntary annexing. So when people say we're putting farmers out of business, it's the farmers' children, grandchildren that didn't want to farm no more that decided they're selling the family farm, or siblings squabbling over what's it worth to one another, and the other one wants to sell and leave elsewhere. Eminent domain is another example that certainly we could, but then we have to prove why it's of a public necessity and not just the fact that we wanted certain property. So when we have these growth, I think that's why when we have a healthy balance of commercial, business, industrial versus the residential, it's better. I had a meeting earlier today to where we're talking with a lot of people, but basically they were talking about extending the red line and whether it should stop in Mount Morn, Davidson, Mooresville, or even Troutman. I of course cannot speak without you all's permission as to what your thoughts are, but Mooresville appetite is no. If you have looked at the end of the lines and other areas, regardless of what state or where, those areas are a plight area and certainly draw a lot of crime. So I think nobody wants to be on the end of the line. Then the second question is, why are you building it? What's the intent? If it's to get more people to Charlotte, how does that benefit Troutman other than being a bedroom community? Residential costs us a lot more as a town than not. What we have experienced factually is an increase in crime coming from Charlotte. And if we're going to make it easier for some people to get here, I think that will continue to increase. And that was also discussed at the meeting. The CATS representative was real quick to say, well, we're only CATS, so we can't tell y'all what you should and shouldn't do in these other areas. The modes of transportation can be debated by our community and the experts out there everywhere. But whether one guy wanted to build an underground thing all the way, others wanted to do something different. But the numbers cost is everybody could Uber and you could save about 50% of the money without building nothing. But that still increases a lot of traffic on the roads. All right?
And the other sheet was the sample of the water bill that our new vendor would print out and mail out. So they say they're ready to go as soon as we give them the green light. So I would like for y'all to look over it and see if you want anything else changed before we proceed.
That's what, you go ahead.
Floor is yours. Okay.
No,
I like the way it looks. I would only ask, what would the debris limb pickup fee look like and street sweeper fee, and are those necessary? Are they, you know, we talked about them during the budget, but are they a cost that is passed off? Are they?
What town council had decided previously was the annual debris, leaf, and limb. Specifically, the leaf and limb pickup would continue out of our ad valorem property taxes. Up until 2 years ago, the town was only charging $1 and something for all. Leaf, limb, trash, recycle, all of it. Once our CPA arrived and pointed out that egregious mistake in the way things should normally be done, then we started collecting about 80% of our trash and recycle. At that time is when council as a whole decided leave leaf and limb as part of the ad valorem taxes. I do think it should be left on there. That way in the future, if town council decides to start passing that cost on to the citizens, that it's already there and it is already letting them know there could be a fee for it.
And it would, I mean, kind of the same for the street sweeper?
I think Eddie's ready to blow it up.
We put the past to bed. I love the sweeper.
He's got his brushes down there.
With the services that we pay and due to several citizen complaints and things from council, I have visited several others, whether it was city-owned, municipal operated, or whether it was contracted services. I don't think there's ever going to be a good answer for a street sweeper. If you use the water ones, it costs a whole lot more, but there's certainly not dust. But they do not pick up as clean as the non-water ones. So if you use the non-water ones, it appears there's more dust and debris flying in the air than what's actually getting sucked into the truck. But yes, it's certainly up to you all, but I would encourage leaving it as our town grows. That may be something that we explore to do on our own.
I think it makes sense to leave it. It's not hurting anything, but to your point, another councilman come in and go, the price just went up and, you know, it shows up on the bill. But I also think it's a service that a lot of people don't realize it's a service, because we're not really talking a whole lot about it on a day-to-day basis, or month to month when they get the bill. So it shows up here, there's no cost. It may cause some questions, at least on the initial, why is this on my bill?
That's when we simply respond, it's a service you're getting now, and it, due to the cost, it's coming out of your ad valorem taxes. But if that increases,
That reminds me of an example. From a private industry standpoint, company I retired from, once a year, you know, you get paid a certain salary. They sent out on your benefits too. They said, you're getting paid this, but you don't realize it. And probably it doubled my salary when I saw the cost of benefits. It doubled my salary. I said, wow, I'm getting paid a lot more than I thought. Once a year, they sent that out, reminding you don't
We
just
need
get
to-
paid, you know, X number of dollars. You get paid plus your benefits. You know, this is what the benefits are worth, costing us to provide you. So this is the same thing, and you know, you show up. You know, this is what we're providing, you know, yes, I hate it for the increase in the garbage pickup and so on, recycling, but this is what you're getting, you know, at zero right now. I say zero, I mean, I'm coming out of ad valorem, so I'm telling you, somebody gotta pay the bill sooner or later, but, it's not a part of this.
is everybody else good with it?
Thank you. Thank you all.
That's all I have ready for closed session if you all are.
If there's nothing else, for the good of the order, I'll accept the motion to go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 1.3, 318, 11A3, to consult with an attorney.
So move, make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Please meet in the room.
Just the clerks and our attorney and you all.